Hi guys, it's Danica Christin, and this is a comparison video between the Everest Base Camp track and the Annapurna Base Camp track. If you're new to my channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below because I make new trekking and travel videos every week. I've also done a comparison video between the Everest Base Camp track and the Annapurna circuit, and I'll link that somewhere up here. The Everest Base Camp track takes about 12 to 14 days and goes up to 5,300 meters above sea level, whereas the Annapurna Base Camp track is much shorter. It only takes about 7 to 8 days and it only goes up to 4,100 meters. There is a possible extension of the Annapurna Base Camp track which goes up Poon Hill, and that takes another 4 days. The hiking season for both of these tracks is pretty much the same. It starts kind of at the beginning of October and goes to early mid-December. That's the first season, and then there's a second season in spring which is between March and May. However, I do need to say that the months of October and November are definitely the best for trekking because the weather is the most beautiful at that time of year, and although it's a little bit colder than in spring, the views really make up for the colder temperatures. One really big difference between those two tracks is how you get there. So to get to Everest is a bit of a pain because you have only really two options. One is to take an expensive flight from Kathmandu to the trailhead in Lukla, which is about $300, and it's a quite dangerous flight because Lukla is infamous for being the world's most dangerous airport. So that's kind of a con of that track. You can also hike from kind of the Kathmandu area outside Kathmandu to the trailhead of Everest. It will take you about a week, but once you pay for accommodation, for food, for possibly a porter guide, you probably paid $300 as well, so might as well take the flight. The trailhead of the Annapurna Base Camp track can be reached much easier. You can basically take a bus from Kathmandu or Pokhara, or if you want to fly, you can fly from Kathmandu to Pokhara and then the bus ride is a lot shorter. The cost of the tracks is quite different because to get to Everest, you'll probably have to fly, and the trek is much longer, so that makes it more expensive, and also the cost per day is higher. So on the Everest track I spent about $25 a day for food and accommodation, whereas on the Annapurna Base Camp track it was only about $20. So you can see it's a lot cheaper. On both tracks you can rent sleeping bags and down jackets, which I highly recommend. They cost $1 each per day. I also highly recommend getting a porter guide, and that he will cost about $18 a day if you hire him. A guide is not really necessary, but it's great to have someone with you to help you with your luggage because you're going to be carrying about 10 to 12 kilos, and for someone who's not used to high altitude, that's quite a lot, and it's really difficult to carry that much luggage up the mountain. But the locals, they're quite used to the altitude and they're happy to carry your backpack, you know, if you pay them a salary. So that's kind of a win-win situation. Compared to the Annapurna Base Camp track, Everest has three major downsides. One is altitude. So the Everest Base Camp track goes a lot higher. It goes to 5,300 meters approximately, and at that altitude you can really feel it. Altitude sickness can be a big problem, so take that into consideration when you decide which trek you want to do. The second problem is that on Everest it gets so much colder due to the higher altitude. So on that track I spent about, I think, 11 nights above 3,000 meters, whereas on the Annapurna track it was only one night. So that's a really big difference because you're going to be freezing at night. You have a sleeping bag and you have blankets, but some nights it can still be quite cold, so that's another factor. Some people actually told me that while they did the Everest track, they had their water bottle in their room and the water in that bottle froze solid overnight. that is how cold it gets. The third downside of Everest compared to the Annapurna Base Camp is that on Everest there's so many yucks carrying, you know, supplies and whatnot up the mountain, and there's just so many of them, and it can be quite dangerous and it's a bit of a nuisance, so that's something you'll have to put up with if you do Everest. But of course, Everest also has some really amazing highlights. Number one, of course, you get to see Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. That is truly amazing. And there's a beautiful monastery in the village of Tengboche on the way up to base camp that you should definitely visit. It's absolutely beautiful and it's a great experience because you can go and attend the ceremony, which is fantastic. Also, you get to see really amazing mountain scenery that is nothing like anything you've ever seen. So those are just really good points that make the Everest Base Camp trek just so worthwhile doing. The Annapurna Base Camp trek starts at a much lower altitude, so you have a bigger variety of scenery on the way up the mountain. It's also culturally more diverse and it's kind of more pleasant physically because you won't be as cold as much as you'll be on Everest. The scenery there is really amazing as well, and once you reach Annapurna Base Camp, you are kind of surrounded by mountains. It's kind of like a amphitheater of mountains. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and you can go there for sunrise and it's just absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful place to be. You can also extend the Annapurna Base Camp trek if you want to do a longer trek, and you can add on Poon Hill and even the Annapurna circuit. And that's actually what I did, and that's kind of what I would recommend you do if you do Annapurna Base Camp. Do the whole thing. To come to a bit of a conclusion, both treks are really great. The Annapurna has some advantages, but overall I have to say the scenery is really good on both, but on Everest it's still better. They're both really, really beautiful, but Everest will always be my favorite. The Annapurna Base Camp trek is shorter, it's cheaper, it's warmer, and also a lot easier to do. So for beginners, it's really a good trek. Please don't forget to subscribe if you found this video helpful, as there are more coming soon. And please let me know in the comments if you've got any questions about this trek or another one in Nepal. I've done several, so I'm happy to help you out. Bye!